after having just seen all 3 demos for Resident Evil 6, I'm actually pretty hopeful for this game. In fact, I thought it would be a good idea to do a video looking back on Resident Evil 5 to see where Capcom kind of faltered with this game. Now don't get me wrong, I think Resident Evil 5 is a decent enough game. I mean, it has a great story, great characters, and really high production values. But if we're looking at it from a purely technical standpoint, the game has a lot of flaws. Now I am going to do a separate video outlining my thoughts and opinions of the Resident Evil 6 demos by themselves. So I thought it'd be interesting to do a video looking back on Resident Evil 5 and outlining some of the lessons that Capcom hopefully learned going into Resident Evil 6. So without further ado, I give you 6 lessons hopefully learned from Resident Evil 5. Coming in at lesson number 6 is QUICKTIME events, and am I the only one that's really starting to get sick of QUICKTIME events? Don't get me wrong, I think QUICKTIME events do have their place in video games. I mean, if we take a look at games like God of War and Uncharted, QUICKTIME events are used to great effect. I mean, I remember when Resident Evil 4 came out and QUICKTIME events were all the rage. But now they just come off as lazy and unnecessary. I mean, you have instances where you run up to a zombie and a QUICKTIME event comes up and you kick it. But why can't they just add a control where you just kick the guy? You know, when these things first came out in Resident Evil 4, you really got a sense that you were controlling what was going on screen. You know, it's 2012, and I think we expect a lot more from our game developers. That being said, I just hope there are a lot less QUICKTIME events in Resident Evil 6. Coming in at lesson number 5 is survival action versus survival horror. You know, Resident Evil 5 was that game that really experimented, moving away from survival horror and more towards survival action. It marked a huge turning point in the Resident Evil franchise. Now you can argue this was present in Resident Evil 4, but they still really managed to capture that gothic aesthetic very well in that game, and I absolutely loved it. It was very dark, you had a lot of narrow corridors, and, well, let's be honest, it took place in Eastern Europe in these mansions, and it was still very scary. And this is really where Resident Evil 5 kind of broke with that tradition. Instead of splunking in some mansion or castle, going from room to room strategically, you were thrown in an open area with hundreds of zombies, and your only objective was to get from point A to point B. You know, it's not scary, there's no tension. You know, in preparation for this video, I was reading one of the reviews on Resident Evil 5, and someone made a quote that really got to me, and it said, "When did Resident Evil become Gears of War?" And I think that's very much the case for Resident Evil 5. You know, just because you enter an area with 100 zombies chasing you, that doesn't constitute suspense. Now really this reason would be higher up on this list, but to be honest, if they did everything on a technical level brilliantly, I would really have no qualms with it being a more survival action versus a survival horror game. And looking at the demos for Resident Evil 6, it seems that Capcom is very much sticking to this style of gameplay, but I'm hopeful they could still create a great game by doing so. Coming in at lesson number 4 is the terrible controls of Resident Evil 5, and let me tell you, I really hated the controls in Resident Evil 5. The melee attacks. You know, if you wanted to kill a zombie with your knife, you had to take it out and you had to stab him, and if he fell, he'd often fall out of range, so you had to holster your knife and move, and then take it out again, and then, you know, stab him pointing downward, but this would leave you open for attacks because there'd be 100 zombies surrounding you. The controls in Resident Evil 5 were just a complete mess. The running was slow and it was sluggish, especially if you were in these environments that were open area where you're just surrounded by zombies, and in order to shoot your gun, you had to stop, turn around, and shoot, and by then there'd be like a dozen zombies on you, and you'd have to back up, run, and then turn around and shoot again. I mean, like a lot of people, I consider Resident Evil 4 to be a masterpiece, and when I put in the disc for Resident Evil 5, I was expecting the same thing. So you can imagine my surprise when I got completely different control schemes that were just overall unresponsive and unreliable. I just hope that Capcom takes the complaints of its customers seriously and really revamps their control schemes so that they're more user-friendly and more accessible. Coming in at lesson number 3 is the inventory system. And it's really amazing how bad they mucked up the inventory system in Resident Evil 5. One thing that frustrated the hell out of me is that when you bring up your inventory menu, it doesn't pause the game. So essentially, whenever you have to do anything involving your inventory, you're open up to attack at any given moment. Now this works great in a game like Dark Souls, but in a Resident Evil game, it's just incredibly boneheaded. I really don't know why Capcom went this way with this aspect of gameplay. Instead of sticking with the grid system attaché case from Resident Evil 4, which I loved, they went back to the old school style inventory system where you're given 9 slots for your items and weapons. Now I wouldn't have minded this type of inventory system so much if I didn't have to control 2 sets of inventories. See, not only do you get to manage your own inventory system, but you get to manage Sheva's inventory system. And it really is a pain in the ass. Let's say both of your inventory systems are full, and you have a gun that you want to reload, but you don't have the ammo for it, but Sheva does. Well, logically, you'd just be able to combine your ammo with the gun, and that would be that. But no. First you've got to unequip the weapon, then you've got to drop an item so that you can bring her ammo over to your inventory system, at which point you equip the weapon and load your gun, and then you got to pick up the dropped item. Are you starting to see where the inventory system really gets frustrating? I honestly don't know why they didn't stick with the old system from Resident Evil 4. You know, why couldn't you just have one central hub for your inventory and assign weapons and ammo accordingly? And what does Capcom have to say about this? It adds tension. Let me give you a little advice, Capcom. Adding frustrating controls doesn't add tension, okay? It adds frustration. And quite honestly, it is the most backwards-ass inventory system that I've ever seen. Coming in at lesson number 2 is incompetent AI. Now I really hope that the guys at Capcom did a complete overhaul on the AI for Resident Evil 6, because let me tell you, the AI in Resident Evil 5 sucks. Throughout the entire game, you're partnered with Shiva or Sheva or whatever the hell her name is, and she is the most useless character in video game history. First of all, she doesn't help you at all, and if she's in trouble, she expects you to help her. You know, a lot of these games you want to be very stealthy, you want to be very quiet, and she'll just run ahead through a corridor and flush out these zombies like some idiot. And don't even think about giving this bitch your herbs, because if you get as much as a paper cut, she'll spray you down and heal you, and waste all of your first aid supplies. You know, there was one point where I gave Sheva a pistol, a machine gun, and a sniper rifle. And you know what she defends herself with? A stun gun. A fucking stun gun. It really is amazing how bad this AI is. Now, after watching all 3 demos for Resident Evil 6, it has been confirmed that you will be paired up with either someone online or another AI. And I just hope in the last 2 or 3 years since Resident Evil 5 that they've made vast improvements to AI to the point where they don't burden the player. Let's just hope Capcom takes this one to heart, because quite honestly, we did not need Sheva at all in this game. Which brings me to my final lesson, and that is cooperative gameplay. I like to think of Resident Evil 5 as a failed experiment, and I say failed experiment loosely because I'm sure that if you played Resident Evil 5 with a friend online, that it was a fantastic experience. But if you were someone like me who had to suffer through the single-player campaign, it was such an excruciating experience. I don't know why they couldn't just keep the single-player campaign 1 person and the cooperative gameplay experience 2 people. I mean, why couldn't they have poured all their efforts into this great single-player campaign and then give you the option of playing cooperative gameplay with a friend online? And I gotta tell you, adding another person to the gameplay, whether it be an AI or a friend online, does not make it a more suspenseful game. I don't think having a second player in-game the whole time makes it a scarier experience as a result. But if the demos for Resident Evil 6 are any indication, it seems that you'll be partnered up through each of the 3 campaigns, whether you like it or not. Now, the one saving grace is that in the 2 or 3 years since Resident Evil 5 is that a lot more people are playing games online, whether it's with the PS3 or with the Xbox 360, so hopefully it'll be a much smoother experience. And there you have it, the top 6 lessons hopefully learned from Resident Evil 5. Now, I want to hear what you have to say. Do you agree with my reasons? Do you disagree with them? Feel free to post a comment in the comment section below. That being said, I look forward to seeing you guys in my next video. Thanks for watching. As always, feel free to rate, comment, and subscribe to my channel.